Imagine standing beneath an open sky 300 million years ago. The air is thick, humid, heavy with oxygen. Above you, something moves. Not a bird, not anything you'd recognize. A dragonfly, but not like any dragonfly you've ever seen. Its wingspan stretches wider than your outstretched arms. 2.5 feet from wingtip to wingtip. It darts between the towering ferns and ancient trees. A predator of the Carboniferous skies, hunting in a world that has never known the beat of a bird's wing or the flutter of a bat. Welcome to Bedtime Biology, where science meets serenity. Each night, we explore the quiet wonders of the natural world, calming your mind and sparking your curiosity. Please, like, subscribe, and comment below with where you're checking in from. Tonight, we're embarking on one of the most remarkable journeys in the history of life on Earth. We're going to trace the story of how nature learned to fly. Not once, but 4 separate times. 4 independent evolutionary experiments, each solving the same fundamental problem in completely different ways. Insects, pterosaurs, birds, and bats. Each group invented flight from scratch, each using different materials, different body plans, different evolutionary pathways. This is a story that spans hundreds of millions of years. It's a story of hollow bones and membranous wings, of feathers that evolved long before flight, of muscles that learned to beat hundreds of times per second. It's about the physics of air and the biology of adaptation, about how gravity became optional for those brave or desperate enough to leap into the unknown. So settle in, get comfortable. Let the soft glow of your screen be your campfire as we travel back through deep time, watching as Earth's creatures, one lineage after another, discovered the gift of the sky, the physics of flight, understanding the invisible ocean. Before we can understand how animals learned to fly, we need to understand what flight actually is. What does it mean to move through air? What forces are at play? The air around us seems like nothing, empty space, but to a flying creature, air is everything. It's an ocean of invisible molecules, and like water, it can push and pull, support and resist. Every flying animal, from the smallest gnat to the largest albatross, must contend with 4 fundamental forces. These forces are universal, unchanging, the same today as they were 300 million years ago. They are lift, weight, thrust, and drag. Weight is the simplest to understand. It's gravity, pulling downward, always present, always working to bring everything back to Earth. An animal's weight is determined by its mass, and mass matters enormously in flight. A creature that weighs too much will find the air insufficient to hold it up. A creature that weighs too little might struggle to penetrate strong winds. Evolution has to balance carefully, and we'll see how different groups solve this problem in different ways. Lift is the force that opposes weight, the upward push that keeps a flyer aloft. Lift is generated by wings moving through air, by the special shape of those wings, and the angle at which they meet the airflow. When air flows over a wing, it travels faster over the curved upper surface than the flatter lower surface. This difference in speed creates a difference in pressure. Lower pressure above, higher pressure below. The result? The wing is pushed upward. This is lift. But lift doesn't come for free. Every wing generating lift also generates drag, a backward force that opposes forward motion. Drag is friction, resistance, the cost of moving through a fluid medium. Air molecules collide with the wing, creating turbulence, pulling backward. The faster you go, the more drag you experience. The shape of your body matters enormously. A streamlined form cuts through air with minimal resistance. An irregular shape creates eddies and vortices that sap energy and slow you down. And then there's thrust, the forward force that counteracts drag and propels the animal through the air. In powered flight, thrust comes from the action of wings or other appendages pushing air backward. By Newton's third law, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Push air backward and you move forward. These four forces must be balanced. In steady, level flight, lift equals weight and thrust equals drag. The animal neither rises nor falls, neither speeds up nor slows down. It glides smoothly through its invisible ocean. But flight is rarely steady. To take off, lift must exceed weight. To climb, you need excess lift and thrust. To turn, to dive, to land gracefully requires constant modulation of these forces, a continuous dance of adjustment and control. The mathematics of flight are complex, but the principles are elegant. The amount of lift generated depends on several factors. Wing area is critical. Larger wings create more lift, all else being equal, but they also create more drag, and they're heavier. Wing shape matters too. The curve of the wing, its thickness, its aspect ratio, the ratio of wingspan to wing width, all influence how efficiently it generates lift. The angle of attack, the angle at which the wing meets the oncoming air, is crucial. Increase the angle, and you increase lift up to a point. Too steep, and the airflow separates from the wing surface. The wing stalls. Lift collapses. Every pilot knows this danger, and so does every bird, every bat, every insect that has survived in the air for more than a few moments. Speed is another vital factor. Lift increases with a square of velocity. Fly twice as fast, generate 4 times as much lift. This has profound implications. Large animals must fly fast to generate enough lift to support their weight. Small animals can afford to fly slowly, to hover, to maneuver in tight spaces. The relationship between size, speed, and lift creates different niches in the aerial realm. Different ways of making a living in the sky. Air density plays a role too. Thicker air provides more lift, more resistance, more to push against. High in the mountains, where the air is thin, wings must work harder. Birds struggle. Flight becomes more difficult. Conversely, the ancient Carboniferous atmosphere, with oxygen levels reaching 35% compared to today's 21%, was denser, richer, more buoyant. The air of that time offered more support, and we'll see how this may have enabled the evolution of giant flying insects. The physics of flight imposes limits. There's a maximum size for flying animals, determined by the scaling laws of biology and aerodynamics. As an animal grows larger, its weight increases faster than its wing area. Weight scales with the cube of linear dimensions, but wing area scales with the square. Double an animal's length, and its weight increases 8-fold, but its wing area only quadruples. Eventually, you reach a point where wings can't grow large enough to support the weight, or where the muscles needed to flap those wings become impossibly massive. The largest flying birds today, like the wandering albatross, have wingspans approaching 12 feet. The largest flying insects are orders of magnitude smaller. The physics simply won't allow a hummingbird the size of an eagle or a dragonfly the size of a hawk. Well, not today, anyway. In the past, under different atmospheric conditions, the limits were different, and we'll explore creatures that pushed those boundaries to their extremes. there's also a minimum size for flight. Below a certain scale, air behaves differently. For tiny insects, air becomes viscous, almost syrupy. The rules change. Flight requires different strategies, different wing designs, different ways of generating thrust. Some of the smallest flying insects don't use traditional wings at all, but rather paddle through the air with feather-like bristles, swimming through the aerial medium as if it were molasses. Understanding these physical principles helps us appreciate the challenges that evolution faced when animals first attempted to conquer the air. Flight is expensive, energetically costly, mechanically complex, and fraught with danger. A mistake in the air can be fatal. An injured wing means starvation. A failed takeoff means becoming prey. Yet despite all these challenges, flight evolved. Not once, not twice, but 4 independent times. The rewards must have been extraordinary. What were those rewards? What drove animals to leave the relative safety of the ground or the trees? The advantages of flight are numerous. Flight offers escape from predators. A creature that can take to the air can flee from danger in ways that ground-bound animals cannot. Flight offers access to food sources that others can't reach. Flowers in the canopy, insects swarming above the forest, fish near the water's surface, all become accessible to a flyer. Flight offers rapid travel. A bird can cover in hours what might take a walking animal days. Migration becomes possible, allowing animals to exploit seasonal abundances across vast distances. Flight offers a view. From above, a flyer can survey the landscape, spot prey, find mates, locate nesting sites. The aerial perspective is a powerful advantage. And perhaps most importantly, flight offers 3-dimensional freedom. While ground-dwelling animals are constrained to navigate a essentially flat surface, flyers can move up and down as easily as forward and back, left and right. The sky is a vast, 3-dimensional habitat, and those who could access it found opportunities aplenty. But before any animal could reap these benefits, they had to solve the fundamental problem of getting airborne and staying there. They had to develop wings, or wing-like structures, capable of generating lift. They had to evolve the musculature to move those wings with sufficient power and speed. They had to modify their bodies to reduce weight without sacrificing strength. They had to develop the neural systems to control flight, to process sensory information quickly enough to navigate in 3 dimensions at speed. They had to evolve the metabolic capacity to fuel the enormous energy demands of flight. These are not simple problems. They require coordinated changes across multiple body systems, changes that must be advantageous at each step of the way. Evolution can't plan ahead. It can't suffer through millions of years of disadvantageous intermediates in hopes of eventual flight. Every step must provide some benefit, some reason for natural selection to favor it. So, how did it happen? How did nature, working blind, without foresight or intention, craft creatures that could defy gravity and soar? Let's begin at the beginning, with the very first flyers, the pioneers who opened the skies for all who would follow. The first flyers. Insects take to the air. The first animals to fly were not vertebrates. They weren't even close to vertebrates. They were arthropods, the ancestors of modern insects, and they took to the air sometime during the Devonian or early Carboniferous period, somewhere around 350 to 400 million years ago. The exact timing is uncertain. The fossil record from that era is frustratingly incomplete, full of gaps and ambiguities. But what we do know is striking. When insects began to fly, they were the only animals in the air. There were no predators to chase them through the sky, no competitors for aerial resources. The air was empty, a vast ecological void waiting to be filled, and insects filled it spectacularly. By the late Carboniferous period, roughly 300 million years ago, the skies were full of flying insects. Not just flying, thriving, diversifying into an astounding array of forms. The fossil record from this time shows us dragonfly-like creatures called griffinflies, with wingspans that seem almost unbelievable. Meganeura monyi, perhaps the most famous of these, ancient giants, had a wingspan of about 65 to 75 centimeters. That's 2 to 2.5 feet. Its body was over an inch thick. This was a predatory insect the size of a large hawk. There were other giants too. Prehistoric mayflies reached sizes that would startle us today. Cockroaches, those eternal survivors, appeared during this period in forms both familiar and strange. The diversity was staggering. In just a few tens of millions of years, insects went from a handful of non-flying forms to more than 100 different flying families. It was an evolutionary explosion, one of the most rapid and successful radiations in the history of life. What made this possible? The answer appears to be atmospheric. During the Carboniferous period, oxygen levels in the atmosphere were much higher than they are today, perhaps 30 to 35% compared to our current 21%. This oxygen-rich air had profound effects. Higher oxygen means higher air density, and denser air provides more lift. It also means insects could breathe more efficiently. Insects don't have lungs like we do. They breathe through a network of tubes called tracheae, which branch throughout their bodies, delivering oxygen directly to tissues. This system works well, but it has limits. Oxygen can only diffuse so far through these tubes before the concentration drops too low to sustain metabolism. This limits insect size. But in an atmosphere with more oxygen, that limitation relaxes. Oxygen diffuses farther, faster, allowing insects to grow larger while still getting enough oxygen to their tissues. The combination of higher lift from denser air and better oxygen delivery from higher concentrations created conditions where giant insects were not only possible, but perhaps even advantageous. A larger body could hold more eggs, produce more offspring. Larger wings could carry the insect farther, allowing it to exploit resources over wider areas. Larger size offered protection from predators, though in the Carboniferous, aerial predators were other insects, so there was probably an arms race, predators and prey both growing larger in mutual escalation. But how did insect wings evolve in the first place? This is one of the great mysteries of evolutionary biology. Unlike the wings of bats, birds, and pterosaurs, which are clearly modified limbs, insect wings are something else entirely. They're not modified legs or arms. They're completely novel structures, outgrowths from the body that have no obvious precursors. Several theories have been proposed. One early idea suggested that wings evolved from gills. Ancient aquatic insect larvae had gill-like structures on their backs, and perhaps these structures were co-opted for flight when insects moved onto land. However, recent evidence suggests that the earliest flying insects were likely terrestrial, not aquatic, which makes this theory less compelling. Another hypothesis is that wings originated from lateral lobes or paranota on the sides of the thorax. These structures might have initially served to protect the legs or to aid in gliding from elevated perches. Over time, these fixed lobes became articulated, capable of movement, and eventually evolved the musculature and neural control needed for active flapping flight. A more recent and intriguing idea is that insect wings share developmental similarities with legs. Certain genes involved in wing development are also involved in leg development, suggesting that wings and legs might be variations on a common developmental theme, controlled by similar genetic machinery, but expressed in different body regions. Whatever their origin, insect wings are remarkable structures. Unlike vertebrate wings, which are supported by bones, insect wings are membranous, thin sheets of cuticle supported by a network of veins. These veins are not vessels for blood flow, they're actually hollow tubes that provide structural support and flexibility. The pattern of veins is specific to different insect groups, and paleontologists use these patterns to classify fossil insects, much as we might use the shape of bones to classify fossil vertebrates. Insect flight muscles are also unique. Most insects that beat their wings fewer than 100 times per second use what are called synchronous muscles. These muscles contract once for each nerve impulse they receive, a one-to-one relationship between neural signal and muscle contraction. But many insects beat their wings much faster than this, hundreds of times per second. A hummingbird beats its wings about 50 to 80 times per second, and we consider that impressively fast. A honeybee beats its wings about 200 times per second. Some midges reach over 1,000 beats per second. How is this possible? The answer lies in a specialized type of muscle called asynchronous muscle. These muscles don't contract in direct response to nerve impulses. Instead, they're activated by stretch. When the muscle is stretched, it contracts. The contraction then stretches the opposing muscle, which contracts in turn, which stretches the first muscle again. It's a mechanical oscillation, powered by nerve impulses that act more like a switch, turning the system on or off, rather than controlling each individual contraction. This system allows incredibly rapid wing beats, far faster than any nerve could fire. It's one of the key innovations that made insects such successful flyers. It's also part of what produces that characteristic buzzing sound we associate with many flying insects, the rapid vibration of wings cutting through air at frequencies we can hear. The diversity of insect flight is extraordinary. Some insects are powerful, fast flyers, capable of sustained long-distance migration. Monarch butterflies travel thousands of miles from North America to Mexico. Desert locusts can fly for hours without resting, covering vast distances in their devastating swarms. Dragonflies are among the most agile flyers on Earth, capable of hovering, flying backward, and performing acrobatic maneuvers that would challenge any human-built aircraft. Other insects are more modest in their aerial abilities. Some beetles fly clumsily, their heavy armored bodies and relatively small wings making flight laborious. Some flies are slow and unsteady, but almost all insects can fly, or descend from ancestors that could. Flight is the default state for insects, the ancestral condition that defines the group. The success of insect flight had cascading effects on terrestrial ecosystems. Flying insects could disperse more widely, colonizing new habitats, escaping poor conditions, finding mates across greater distances. They became pollinators, forming partnerships with flowering plants that would reshape the face of the planet. They became prey for other animals, creating food sources that would drive the evolution of insectivorous vertebrates. They became pests, parasites, disease vectors, and recyclers of dead material. They became, in short, integral to nearly every terrestrial ecosystem on Earth. But the age of the giant insects would not last forever. Oxygen levels began to decline from their Carboniferous peak, gradually returning to lower concentrations. The great swamp forests that had covered much of the land began to shrink. Climate changed. And then, about 150 million years ago, something else happened. Birds appeared. Birds were predators, and they were very good at catching insects. They were fast, maneuverable, and they hunted during the day when many insects were active. Studies have shown that the size of the largest insects began to decline sharply around the time birds diversified. It seems that the presence of aerial vertebrate predators created new selective pressures. Smaller insects were more maneuverable, better able to evade bird attacks. Larger insects became liabilities, easy targets for hungry birds. The reign of the giant insects ended, but insects themselves did not. They adapted, diversified, became smaller and more varied. Today, there are more species of insects than all other animals combined. They fill virtually every terrestrial and freshwater habitat. They are, by any measure, one of the most successful groups of organisms on Earth. And it all began with those first tentative flights, 350 million years ago, when some arthropod ancestor spread its nascent wings and discovered that the air could hold it up. Gliding, nature's gateway to the sky's flight, is hard. As we've discussed, it requires major modifications to body structure, musculature, and metabolism. It demands energy, continuous effort, constant vigilance. But there's an easier way to move through the air, one that requires no flapping, no powered thrust, just gravity and the right body shape. That way is gliding. Gliding has evolved dozens of times in various lineages. Unlike powered flight, which has evolved only 4 times, gliding appears whenever the right conditions present themselves. We see gliding in mammals, reptiles, amphibians, even spiders and ants. In forests where trees are tall and widely spaced, gliding offers obvious advantages. It allows an animal to move from tree to tree without descending to the dangerous ground below. It's faster than climbing down and back up. It saves energy compared to leaping and risking injury from a hard landing. Among mammals, several groups have independently evolved gliding. There are the flying squirrels of North America and Eurasia, members of the rodent family Sciuridae. There are the sugar gliders and related species of Australia, small marsupials that look remarkably like flying squirrels, despite being only distantly related. There are the anomalures, or scaly-tailed flying squirrels of Africa, yet another group of gliding rodents, convergently similar to the others. And then there are the colugos, the most accomplished gliders of all. Colugos, sometimes called flying lemurs, though they're neither flying nor lemurs, live in the rainforests of Southeast Asia. They are unlike any other mammal. Their gliding membrane, called a patagium, stretches from their neck to their fingertips, from their fingertips to their toes, from their toes to the tip of their tail. It's the most extensive gliding membrane in the mammal world. A colugo is essentially a living kite. When a colugo leaps from a tree, it can glide extraordinary distances. Observations have documented glides of more than 130 meters. That's about 450 feet, roughly 1.5 football fields. And it doesn't just fall forward. It glides with a remarkably flat glide angle, losing only about 3 feet of altitude for every 40 feet of horizontal travel. That's a glide ratio of better than 13:1, comparable to some human-made hang gliders. How do they do it? The secret is in that enormous patagium. When spread, it creates a huge surface area relative to the animal's weight. This high surface area to weight ratio means that air resistance, drag, acts powerfully on the colugo. But the shape of the patagium, slightly curved, cambered, creates lift as well. Air flows over the membrane, pressure differences develop, and the colugo is pushed upward even as it moves forward. It's not powered flight. There's no thrust to maintain altitude indefinitely, but it's far more than simple falling. It's controlled, aerodynamic locomotion. Colugos can also maneuver while gliding. By adjusting the tension in their patagium, by changing the angle of their body, they can turn, bank, control their descent. They can aim for a specific landing spot, adjusting their trajectory in mid-air to compensate for wind or to avoid obstacles. This level of control requires sophisticated neuromuscular coordination and sensory feedback. The colugo must continuously assess its position, velocity, and orientation, making split-second adjustments to its body configuration. Flying squirrels show similar, though less extreme, capabilities. A flying squirrel's patagium extends from wrist to ankle, but doesn't include the tail or fingers to the same extent as a colugo's. Their glide ratios are typically around 2:1 or 3:1, not as impressive as colugos, but still useful for moving through the forest canopy. Flying squirrels are primarily nocturnal, using their large eyes to navigate in darkness. They glide from tree to tree, foraging for nuts, seeds, and fungi, covering large areas of forest each night. Studies of flying squirrels using high-speed cameras have revealed the complexity of their gliding behavior. When launching, a squirrel leaps forcefully, extending its legs to spread the patagium. During the glide, it can adjust its posture, tilting and banking to steer. As it approaches its target tree, it executes a remarkable maneuver, a pitch-up. It rotates its body upward, increasing the angle of attack of its patagium. This dramatically increases drag and lift, slowing the squirrel down just before impact. The result is a controlled, gentle landing on the tree trunk, with all 4 feet absorbing the impact. This landing maneuver is critical. Without it, the squirrel would crash into the tree at high speed, risking injury. The ability to slow down before landing is one of the key features that makes gliding a viable mode of locomotion. Studies on colugos have shown that their landing forces actually decrease with longer glides, which seems counterintuitive. You'd think that gliding farther would mean building up more speed and hitting harder. But colugos, like flying squirrels, have mastered the pitch-up landing. The longer they glide, the more time they have to adjust their trajectory and aerodynamic configuration, resulting in gentler landings. Gliding is not just about moving between trees, it's also about escaping predators. A gliding squirrel or colugo can flee an arboreal predator by leaping off the tree and gliding to another one, putting distance between itself and the threat far more quickly than climbing or running ever could. For a predator without gliding ability, the prey has essentially vanished, moved to an entirely different part of the forest in seconds. But gliding has its limitations. You can only go down or sideways, never up. You need elevation to start with, a high perch from which to launch, and you need somewhere to land, another tree or structure within gliding range. In open habitats, gliding is useless. This is why gliding mammals are found primarily in forests, and particularly in tropical forests, with tall, widely spaced trees. Gliding also serves as a model for how powered flight might evolve. Most scientists agree that flying vertebrates likely went through a gliding stage before developing powered flight. The anatomical changes needed for gliding, elongated limbs, membranous skin flaps, lightweight body structure, are similar to those needed for flight. Gliding provides immediate benefits, even before any flapping ability evolves. An animal that can glide survives falls better, escapes predators better, travels faster. Natural selection favors these traits even before powered flight is possible. Once gliding is established, the pathway to powered flight opens up. Modifications that enhance gliding, that allow slightly more lift, slightly better control, are advantageous. At some point, small flapping movements might provide just enough extra thrust to extend the glide, to gain a bit of altitude, to maneuver more effectively. These movements are energetically cheap at first, minor adjustments to glide trajectory, but they provide a foundation upon which natural selection can build. Muscles strengthen, wing structures elaborate, neural control becomes more sophisticated. Eventually, the glider becomes a flyer. This hypothetical transition from gliding to powered flight isn't just speculation. We can see hints of it in the fossil record and in living animals. Some birds, like young hoatzins in South America, have claws on their wings and use them to clamber about in trees before they can fly. It's not hard to imagine an ancestral bird-like dinosaur doing something similar, climbing trees with clawed hands, gliding between branches, gradually developing the ability to flap and generate thrust. Bats, too, may have evolved through a gliding stage, though the fossil evidence is sparse. The oldest known bat fossils show creatures that were already fully capable of powered flight, but the anatomy of bat wings, with elongated finger bones supporting a thin membrane, is similar to what we see in gliding mammals. It's plausible that ancestral bats glided before they flew, using skin membranes stretched between their limbs, then gradually evolving the musculature and skeletal modifications needed for active flapping. Gliding gives us a window into the evolutionary process. It shows us that complex adaptations like flight don't appear all at once. They build incrementally, each step providing some advantage, each modification favored by natural selection. Gliding is not a failed attempt at flight. It's a successful strategy in its own right, and a potential stepping stone to something even more remarkable. Pterosaurs, the first vertebrate masters. While insects dominated the Carboniferous skies, vertebrates remained resolutely earthbound for millions of years. Amphibians splashed in swamps. Early reptiles scuttled through the undergrowth. None could fly. None had the adaptations necessary to join the insects above. That changed in the late Triassic period, around 230 million years ago, when a group of reptiles took a remarkable evolutionary leap. These reptiles were the pterosaurs, and they were unlike anything that had come before or has existed since. Pterosaurs were not dinosaurs, though they lived alongside them. They were a separate lineage of archosaurs, the same larger group that includes dinosaurs, birds, and crocodilians. Pterosaurs were the first vertebrates to achieve powered flight, and they dominated the skies for over 150 million years, an extraordinarily successful run. The wing of a pterosaur was a marvel of evolutionary engineering. Unlike a bird's wing, which is supported by the bones of the arm and hand, with feathers providing the flight surface, or a bat's wing, which is supported by elongated finger bones with skin stretched between them. A pterosaur's wing was supported primarily by a single, enormously elongated fourth finger. This finger could be longer than the pterosaur's entire body. From it stretched a membranous wing, a thin sheet of skin, muscle, and other tissues that attached to the body and the hind limbs. This membrane, called the patagium, was not simply a passive sheet. Studies of fossilized pterosaur wings, preserved in exceptional detail, have revealed internal structures, fibers called actinofibrils, that provided stiffness and support. These fibers ran through the membrane, controlling its shape, preventing it from fluttering uncontrollably in the wind. The pterosaur could adjust the tension and curvature of its wing by manipulating these internal structures, fine-tuning its aerodynamic properties mid-flight. Pterosaurs came in an astonishing variety of sizes and forms. The earliest pterosaurs were relatively small, with wingspans of just a few feet. Dimorphodon from the early Jurassic had a wingspan of about 4 feet and a large head with sharp teeth, suggesting it may have hunted fish or small animals. Rhamphorhynchus, another early pterosaur, had a long tail with a diamond-shaped vein at the end, possibly used for stability or steering. But as pterosaurs evolved, some lineages grew larger, much larger. By the late Cretaceous period, pterosaurs had reached sizes that pushed the boundaries of what we think of as possible for a flying animal. Pteranodon, perhaps the most famous pterosaur, had a wingspan of around 20 to 23 feet. It had a long, pointed crest extending backward from its skull, which may have served as a rudder during flight or played a role in sexual display. And then there was Quetzalcoatlus, named after the Aztec feathered serpent god. Quetzalcoatlus northropi, the larger of 2 known species in the genus, had an estimated wingspan of up to 36 feet, roughly the size of a small airplane. Its skull alone could be over 6 feet long. Standing on the ground, it would have been as tall as a giraffe. Yet despite its size, it could fly. How was this possible? How could an animal this large get off the ground and stay aloft? The answer lies in a combination of factors. First, pterosaurs had hollow bones, extensively pneumatized, filled with air sacs. This reduced their weight dramatically. Quetzalcoatlus may have weighed only about 200 to 250 kilograms, about 500 pounds, far less than you'd expect for an animal of its size. Its bones were thin-walled, incredibly light, yet surprisingly strong. Second, pterosaurs had powerful flight muscles. The musculature needed to flap wings that large would have been substantial, anchored to an enlarged breastbone or sternum. Pterosaurs also had a structure called a notarium, a fusion of several vertebrae in the shoulder region that provided a rigid, stable attachment point for the wings. This prevented the torso from flexing during the powerful downstroke of the wing, ensuring that all that muscle power translated into lift and thrust. Third, pterosaurs likely used a quadrupedal launch technique. Rather than taking off by running on their hind legs like birds, pterosaurs pushed off with all 4 limbs, using the enormous strength of their wing muscles to vault themselves into the air. Once airborne, they could flap to gain altitude or transition immediately into soaring flight, using updrafts and thermals to stay aloft with minimal energy expenditure. Quetzalcoatlus and other giant pterosaurs were likely not continuous flappers. They were soarers, like modern condors or albatrosses. They would have searched for rising columns of warm air, thermals, and spiraled upward within them, gaining altitude with little effort. Once high, they could glide for long distances, covering many miles before needing to find another thermal. This soaring lifestyle is energetically efficient, allowing large animals to fly without the enormous continuous energy output that constant flapping would require. But soaring has requirements. You need the right kind of air, and you need space. Giant pterosaurs probably spent most of their time over open areas, coasts, plains, places where thermals formed reliably. They may have been poor at maneuvering in tight spaces. Their flight style was probably more similar to that of large terrestrial birds, efficient over long distances, but not particularly agile at close quarters. What did these giant pterosaurs eat? Quetzalcoatlus had a long, toothless beak. Some scientists have suggested it was a scavenger, feeding on carrion like a gigantic vulture. Others propose it was a terrestrial stalker, walking on all fours across open landscapes, probing the ground for small animals, perhaps using its long neck and beak to snatch prey, much like a stork or heron. Fossilized footprints attributed to Ajdarchids, the family to which Quetzalcoatlus belongs, show animals walking on the ground, supporting this idea. Not all pterosaurs were giants. Throughout their history, small and medium-sized pterosaurs remained common. Some had elaborate head crests, structures that were likely used for display, species recognition, or possibly as rudders during flight. The crests were diverse, some tall and semicircular, others long and swept back, others with elaborate shapes that seem almost whimsical. The function of many of these crests is still debated, but their variety suggests that pterosaurs, like birds, were highly visual animals, using appearance for communication. Pterosaurs were also warm-blooded, endothermic. This is evidenced by their active lifestyle, their ability to sustain flight, and by direct fossil evidence of their body covering. Pterosaurs were not scaly like lizards. They were covered in a coat of hair-like filaments called pycnofibers. These structures were similar to down feathers in some ways, providing insulation to maintain body temperature. Some fossils preserve these pycnofibers in exquisite detail, showing different types, from simple filaments to more complex branching structures. The presence of insulation in pterosaurs tells us they were metabolically active, generating their own body heat. Flight demands high metabolic rates. Muscles working continuously to flap wings generate heat, and the animal needs to maintain a stable internal temperature to function efficiently. Pycnofibers provided that thermal regulation, keeping pterosaurs warm in cool conditions, preventing excessive heat loss. Pterosaurs ruled the skies for over 150 million years. They witnessed the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. They lived through dramatic changes in climate and geography. They adapted to a wide range of habitats and lifestyles, but their reign ended abruptly 66 million years ago, at the end of the Cretaceous period. An asteroid struck the Earth, a massive impact that triggered global devastation. The skies darkened with dust and ash. Temperatures plummeted. Food chains collapsed. Non-avian dinosaurs went extinct. And so did pterosaurs. Every single species, from the giants like Quetzalcoatlus to the smallest pterosaurs still flying at that time, all vanished. It was the end of an era. Why did birds survive when pterosaurs did not? It's a difficult question. Both were flying vertebrates, both were endothermic, both had diverse species filling varied niches. Perhaps birds' smaller average size gave them an advantage. Smaller animals need less food, can hide more easily, might weather a catastrophic collapse of food resources better than larger animals. Perhaps birds' keratinous beaks, capable of processing seeds and tough plant material, gave them an edge over pterosaurs that were more dependent on animal prey. Perhaps it was simply luck, some bird populations happening to be in the right place at the right time. Whatever the reason, the extinction of pterosaurs left the skies to birds and, much later, to bats. But pterosaurs' legacy is profound. They proved that vertebrates could fly, that large flying animals were possible, that the air was not the exclusive domain of insects. They demonstrated evolutionary solutions to flight that differ from those of birds and bats, showing that there are multiple ways to solve the problem of heavier than air flight. And they left us with fossils that continue to astonish and inspire, creatures that seem almost too remarkable to have been real, yet were as real as any bird flying overhead today. The dinosaur connection, how birds learned to fly. The story of bird evolution is inseparable from the story of dinosaurs. For a long time, scientists didn't fully appreciate this connection. Birds seemed so different from reptiles, so specialized, so unique, that it was hard to imagine they shared a common ancestry with creatures like Tyrannosaurus rex. But the evidence, accumulated over more than a century, is overwhelming. Birds are dinosaurs. Not descendants of dinosaurs, not relatives of dinosaurs, but actual dinosaurs, members of the theropod lineage that includes some of the most famous predators of the Mesozoic era. The story begins in the mid-19th century, just 2 years after Charles Darwin published his theory of evolution by natural selection. In 1861, a fossilized feather was discovered in limestone quarries in southern Germany. The following year, a nearly complete skeleton was found in the same deposits. The creature was named Archaeopteryx lithographica, and it was extraordinary. Archaeopteryx had feathers. Clear, unmistakable feather impressions surrounded the skeleton, showing wings covered with flight feathers, a long feathered tail, and a body covered in plumage. But in almost every other respect, Archaeopteryx looked like a small theropod dinosaur. It had teeth in its jaws, something no modern bird has. It had claws on its wings, 3 functional fingers at the end of each forelimb. It had a long, bony tail with many vertebrae, unlike the short, fused tail of modern birds. Archaeopteryx was a chimera, a mosaic of reptilian and avian features. It was exactly the kind of transitional form that Darwin's theory predicted should exist. Here was proof, a creature clearly intermediate between non-flying dinosaurs and flying birds. The discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community and provided powerful evidence for evolution. But for decades, Archaeopteryx remained an anomaly. No other feathered dinosaurs were known. It stood alone, a single point of connection between 2 seemingly disparate groups. That changed dramatically in the 1990s, when paleontologists working in northeastern China began finding fossils in rock formations dating to the early Cretaceous period. These fossils were preserved with exceptional detail, and many of them showed something astonishing: feathers. Not just birds had feathers. Dinosaurs had feathers. Many, many dinosaurs. Small theropods like Sinosauropteryx showed simple, filament-like structures covering their bodies. Primitive feathers that looked more like fuzzy hair than the complex feathers of modern birds. Others, like Cordipteryx, had more elaborate feathers, with central shafts and barbs, though they were clearly flightless. Microraptor was covered in long, pennaceous feathers, the kind used for flight, arranged not just on the arms, but also on the legs, creating a four-winged form. These discoveries revolutionized our understanding of bird evolution. Feathers, it became clear, did not evolve for flight. They evolved long before any dinosaur took to the air, probably for insulation. The earliest feathers were simple filaments, much like the pycnofibers of pterosaurs, providing a body covering that helped regulate temperature. Over time, feathers became more complex, developing branches and barbs and the interlocking structures that create the smooth, aerodynamic surfaces we see in modern birds. Once feathers existed, they could be co-opted for other purposes. They might have served in display, bright colors and patterns used to attract mates or intimidate rivals. They might have been used for brooding eggs, parent dinosaurs spreading feathered arms over their nests to shelter developing offspring, and eventually they were used for flight. But when did flight evolve, and how? Archaeopteryx lived about 150 million years ago in the late Jurassic. It had asymmetrical flight feathers, feathers with the leading edge narrower than the trailing edge, a feature that is characteristic of flying birds. Asymmetrical feathers are more aerodynamically efficient, better at generating lift. But could Archaeopteryx actually fly, or was it just a glider? Recent analysis of a remarkably well-preserved Archaeopteryx specimen, one that had been in private hands for decades and only recently studied by scientists, provided new insights. The fossil showed evidence of tertiary feathers, a group of flight feathers that attach to the humerus and are crucial for powered flight in modern birds. The bone structure, the musculature attachments, all suggested that Archaeopteryx was capable of at least limited powered flight, though it probably wasn't a strong or sustained flyer like a modern bird. Archaeopteryx likely used flight in bursts, flapping to gain altitude or to escape predators, then gliding between perches. It probably spent a lot of time on the ground or climbing in trees, using its clawed fingers to grasp branches. Its long tail would have provided stability, acting like a rudder. Its lifestyle might have been similar to that of a modern Holzin, a South American bird that still retains claws on its wings as a juvenile and is a relatively clumsy flyer. After Archaeopteryx, bird evolution continued for millions of years, with birds diversifying into many forms during the Cretaceous period. Some retained teeth, some had long clawed fingers, some had short fused tails. Gradually, the modern bird body plan emerged. Teeth were lost. The tail became a short nub called the pygostyle, from which tail feathers fanned out for steering and balance. The forelimbs became entirely specialized for flight, no longer useful for grasping. The sternum, or breastbone, enlarged and developed a keel, a prominent ridge down the center, where the powerful flight muscles attached. One of the most important changes was in the shoulder girdle. Birds evolved a unique bone called the furcula, commonly known as the wishbone. This V-shaped bone, formed from fused clavicles, acts like a spring, storing and releasing energy during the wing beat cycle. It helps make bird flight efficient, allowing them to fly with less muscular effort than would otherwise be needed. Birds also developed an extraordinarily efficient respiratory system. Unlike mammals, which breathe in and out through the same passageways, birds have a one-way flow of air through their lungs. Air sacs throughout the body act as bellows. pushing air continuously through the lungs in a single direction. This means that oxygen extraction is continuous, not just during inhalation. It's one reason birds can fly at high altitudes, where the air is thin, why bar-headed geese can migrate over the Himalayas at elevations where a human would lose consciousness. The success of bird flight is evident in the diversity and distribution of birds today. There are more than 10,000 species of birds found on every continent, in nearly every habitat. They range in size from the tiny bee hummingbird, weighing less than 2 grams, to the ostrich, a flightless giant weighing over 100 kilograms. They have beaks specialized for everything from cracking seeds to catching fish to probing flowers for nectar. They migrate across entire continents, navigate using the Earth's magnetic field, and demonstrate cognitive abilities that rival those of many mammals. But not all birds can fly. Flight has been lost numerous times in bird evolution. Ostriches, emus, cassowaries, kiwis, penguins, all are flightless. Why would a bird give up flight? The answer usually relates to environment. On islands with no predators, flight becomes less necessary. It's energetically expensive, and if you don't need to escape danger, why maintain the musculature and metabolism for it? Better to reallocate those resources to other activities, like foraging or reproduction. Penguins lost aerial flight, but gained aquatic flight. They fly through water, using their wings as flippers, pursuing fish with speed and agility that rivals any aerial bird. The evolution of birds from theropod dinosaurs is one of the great success stories in the history of life. It shows that even creatures as seemingly immutable as dinosaurs could change, could adapt, could give rise to something entirely new. Birds are living dinosaurs, the only dinosaurs that survived the mass extinction at the end of the Cretaceous. When you watch a sparrow hop across your lawn, or a hawk soar overhead, you're witnessing the legacy of millions of years of evolution. The descendants of animals that once walked alongside Triceratops and Tyrannosaurus rex. Bats. Mammals take flight. For tens of millions of years after the extinction of pterosaurs, the skies were ruled by birds alone. Insects, of course, remained abundant, but among vertebrates, birds had no flying competitors. But around 55 million years ago, in the early Eocene epoch, something remarkable happened. A group of small mammals developed the ability to fly. These were the bats, and their appearance marks the fourth and most recent independent evolution of powered flight in animal history. Bats are extraordinary creatures. They are the only mammals capable of sustained powered flight, a distinction that makes them unique among the more than 6,000 mammal species alive today. But despite their success, there are more than 1,400 species of bats, representing about 20% of all mammal diversity. We know surprisingly little about how they evolved. The earliest definitive bat fossils are from the early Eocene, about 52 to 55 million years ago. These fossils come from places as far apart as Wyoming, France, and India, suggesting that by this time, bats had already spread widely and diversified. And here's the remarkable thing. These earliest bats were already fully formed flyers. Their skeletons show all the hallmarks of powered flight: elongated finger bones, modified forelimbs, evidence of the wing membrane. There are no fossils of protobats, no intermediates showing the gradual transition from non-flying mammal to flying bat. This gap in the fossil record is frustrating. It means we can only speculate about how bats evolved, what ecological pressures drove the evolution of flight, what stages they went through before achieving powered flight. The structure of a bat's wing is unique among flying vertebrates. Unlike a bird's wing, where feathers provide the flight surface, or a pterosaur's wing, where a single elongated finger supports the membrane, a bat's wing is supported by 4 elongated fingers, the second through the 5th. The thumb remains short and retains a claw, used for climbing and maneuvering while roosting. The wing membrane, or patagium, stretches from the side of the body, along the arm and between the fingers, and extends to the hind limbs and often to the tail. It's a double-layered structure, skin on both sides with muscles, connective tissue, and blood vessels in between. This membranous wing gives bats extraordinary control and flexibility. A bat can change the shape of its wing during flight, adjusting the camber, the curvature, the area, allowing it to modulate lift and drag dynamically. This makes bats incredibly maneuverable. They can hover, fly backward, execute sharp turns, navigate through dense vegetation, even catch flying insects in complete darkness. No bird can match a bat for aerial agility in confined spaces. But this flexibility comes at a cost. The wing membrane is delicate, easily damaged. A bat with a torn wing is grounded, unable to hunt, vulnerable to starvation or predation. Healing is slow, and the scar tissue may not be as elastic as the original membrane, potentially impairing flight permanently. This vulnerability may be one reason bats roost in protected locations. Caves, hollow trees, crevices, places where the wings are safe from damage during rest. Bats are primarily nocturnal, active at night when birds are roosting and insect abundance is high. This temporal niche partitioning may have been crucial to bats' success. By flying at night, bats avoided competition with birds and reduced exposure to diurnal predators. But flying at night poses challenges. Visibility is poor. How does a bat navigate? How does it find prey? Most bats use echolocation, a biological sonar system that allows them to perceive their environment through sound. A bat emits high-frequency calls, typically ultrasonic, too high-pitched for humans to hear. These sounds bounce off objects and return as echoes. By analyzing the timing, intensity, and frequency shifts of the echoes, a bat can determine the location, distance, size, and even texture of objects around it. It's a 3-dimensional acoustic image of the world, updated continuously as the bat flies. Echolocation is astonishingly precise. A bat can detect a single strand of spider silk in complete darkness. It can distinguish between different species of insects based on the acoustic signature of their wing beats. It can navigate through a cluttered forest without ever touching a branch. It's one of the most sophisticated sensory systems in the animal kingdom. But did echolocation evolve before or after flight in bats? This question has been hotly debated. One hypothesis, the flight-first hypothesis, suggests that bats evolved flight first, perhaps from gliding ancestors, and then later evolved echolocation to enhance their nocturnal hunting abilities. Another hypothesis, the echolocation first hypothesis, proposes that protobats used echolocation while moving through the forest canopy, using sound to map their surroundings and find prey. And that flight evolved to make this acoustic foraging more effective. The earliest bat fossils provide some clues. Ornithonycteris finei, one of the oldest known bats from about 52 million years ago, had claws on all 5 fingers. Unlike modern bats, which have claws only on the thumb. It also had relatively short, broad wings, suggesting it was a capable but perhaps not very fast flyer. And crucially, it had a small cochlea, the part of the inner ear involved in hearing. In modern bats that echolocate, the cochlea is enlarged to process the high-frequency echoes. Onychonycteris's small cochlea suggests it may not have had sophisticated echolocation, supporting the flight-first hypothesis. However, other early Eocene bats, living at the same time or shortly after, show clear evidence of enlarged cochleae and the specialized ear structures associated with echolocation. This suggests that echolocation evolved very early in bat history, perhaps within just a few million years of the origin of flight. The two traits, flight and echolocation, may have co-evolved, each enhancing the other in a feedback loop. Bats diversified rapidly. By the Middle Eocene, many of the major bat groups we see today had already appeared. There were insectivorous bats using echolocation to hunt flying insects. There were fruit bats, primarily in the Old World, that relied on vision and smell to locate ripe fruit. Some fruit bats, the flying foxes, are among the largest bats, with wingspans exceeding 5 feet, though they remain much smaller than the largest birds or pterosaurs. Bats also evolved a variety of feeding specializations. Some became nectarivores, feeding on flower nectar and pollen, acting as important pollinators in tropical ecosystems. Some became piscivores, fishing bats that use echolocation to detect ripples on the water's surface caused by fish, then snatching the fish with their clawed feet. Some became carnivores, hunting frogs, lizards, small birds, even other bats. And famously, a few bat species became sanguivores, vampire bats that feed exclusively on blood. Vampire bats, found in Central and South America, have evolved remarkable specializations for their blood-feeding lifestyle. They have heat sensors in their nose to detect warm blood flowing near the skin of their prey, typically livestock, but occasionally other animals. They have sharp, blade-like incisors to make a small, painless incision. Their saliva contains anticoagulants that keep the blood flowing. They lap up the blood with their tongue, which is grooved to facilitate flow. It's a highly specialized diet, and only 3 bat species out of more than 1,400 have adopted it. The success of bats is undeniable. They are found on every continent except Antarctica. They play crucial ecological roles as predators of night-flying insects, as pollinators, as seed dispersers. In some ecosystems, bats consume so many insects that they provide measurable pest control services to agriculture, saving farmers billions of dollars annually. They are also, unfortunately, reservoirs for various pathogens, including viruses that can, in rare cases, spill over to humans. But overall, their contributions far outweigh the risks they pose. Bat flight is efficient. Because of their wing design, bats can fly at lower speeds than birds of comparable size, allowing them to hunt in confined spaces. They can hover like hummingbirds, though not for as long. Some migratory bat species fly hundreds of kilometers, traveling between summer and winter ranges, though their migrations are typically shorter than those of long-distance migratory birds. The evolution of bats demonstrates that flight is not a once-and-done event. It's an ongoing process of adaptation and refinement. Bats took a different path than birds, using a different wing structure, a different sensory system, a different ecological strategy. Yet, they achieved the same fundamental goal: mastery of the air. The fact that mammals evolved flight at all 60-some million years after the extinction of pterosaurs, and in a world already full of flying birds, is a testament to the power and creativity of evolution. The mechanics of different flight styles. Now that we've explored the 4 groups of animals that independently evolved powered flight, it's worth stepping back and comparing them. How do the flight styles of insects, pterosaurs, birds, and bats differ? What can these differences tell us about the constraints and possibilities of aerial locomotion? Let's start with wing structure, the most obvious difference. Insect wings are thin membranes supported by a network of veins, fundamentally different from vertebrate wings. They're not modified limbs, but rather outgrowths from the body. Pterosaur wings were supported by one enormously elongated finger, with a membrane stretching to the body and hind limbs. Bird wings are supported by the bones of the arm and hand, with feathers creating the flight surface. Bat wings are supported by 4 elongated fingers, with a membrane spanning between them. Each design has trade-offs. Insect wings are lightweight and can be folded when not in use, a huge advantage for creatures that also need to walk, climb, and squeeze into tight spaces. But they're limited in size. The largest insect wings ever, those of Carboniferous dragonflies, were still much smaller than the wings of even medium-sized birds. Pterosaur wings, with their single finger support, were efficient but somewhat inflexible. Birds' feathered wings are complex, each feather individually controlled, allowing fine adjustments to wing shape and surface area. Bat wings are perhaps the most flexible, capable of dramatic shape changes mid-flight, but they're also the most vulnerable to damage. Wing loading, the ratio of body weight to wing area, varies dramatically across groups. Small insects have very low wing loading. Their large wing area relative to body mass means they fly slowly and are easily buffeted by wind. Large birds, especially soaring birds like albatrosses, have higher wing loading, flying fast and efficiently over long distances, but requiring more space to maneuver. Bats generally have intermediate wing loading, balancing maneuverability with efficiency. Wing beat frequency also differs. Insects, with their asynchronous flight muscles, can achieve incredibly high frequencies, hundreds to over 1,000 beats per second. Birds beat their wings much more slowly, typically between 5 and 100 beats per second, depending on size and species. Hummingbirds are exceptional, reaching 50 to 80 beats per second, approaching the lower range of insect frequencies. Bats are similar to birds, with wing beat frequencies generally between 10 and 20 beats per second, though this varies with species and flight mode. The power requirements for flight depend on size, wing shape, and flight style. Small animals need to flap constantly because they have high wing loading relative to their available muscle power. Large animals can glide and soar using environmental energy sources like updrafts and thermals to stay aloft with minimal flapping. The wandering albatross, with its 12-foot wingspan, can glide for hours without a single wing beat, riding wind patterns over the ocean. It's the most efficient flyer on Earth in terms of energy per distance traveled. Maneuverability is another key difference. Small insects and bats are highly maneuverable, able to turn sharply, change direction rapidly, and navigate complex environments. Birds vary widely. Small songbirds are agile, while large soaring birds are not. Pterosaurs were probably somewhere in between, with small pterosaurs likely quite maneuverable, and large ones limited to more open airspace. Takeoff and landing strategies differ too. Most birds take off using their legs, running along the ground or jumping from a perch, then using wing beats to gain altitude. Bats typically drop from a roost and begin flapping immediately. Pterosaurs, as we've discussed, probably used a quadrupedal launch. Insects simply unfold their wings and start flying. They're lightweight, making takeoff trivial. Landing is equally varied. Birds land on legs, using their wings to brake and control descent, then catching themselves on legs that absorb the impact. Bats can land in remarkable ways, including flying directly onto a perch and hooking on with their feet, or even landing upside down on a cave ceiling, a maneuver that requires exquisite control. Insects land on any surface, using clawed feet to grip. Metabolic cost is a critical factor. Flight is the most energetically expensive form of locomotion for animals of comparable size. Hovering is the most expensive mode, requiring continuous work to overcome gravity with no forward motion to generate lift efficiently. This is why only small animals can hover for extended periods. Hummingbirds and certain insects can do it, but larger animals cannot sustain it. Cruising flight, moving forward at a moderate speed, is more efficient. At cruising speeds, the wings generate lift efficiently, and the metabolic cost per unit distance is actually lower than running or swimming for most animals. This is why birds can migrate such long distances. Though the total energy expenditure is high, the distance covered per calorie burned is impressive. Soaring and gliding are the most efficient flight modes of all. An albatross soaring over the ocean, or a vulture circling on a thermal, expends very little energy. The bird is essentially riding free energy from the environment, the kinetic energy of moving air, or the thermal energy of rising air masses. This is why the largest flying birds are all soarers. It's the only way they can afford to stay aloft, given their size. The ecology of flight also varies. Insects fill an incredible diversity of niches, from predators hunting other insects to pollinators visiting flowers to herbivores feeding on plants. Pterosaurs occupied niches ranging from fish eaters to terrestrial predators. Birds have diversified into even more niches, including seed eaters, fruit eaters, nectar feeders, insect eaters, fish eaters, carnivores, and scavengers. Bats, though primarily insectivorous, also include fruit eaters, nectar feeders, and the unique vampire bats. One interesting pattern is temporal partitioning. Insects are active day and night. Pterosaurs were probably diurnal, active during the day. Birds are mostly diurnal, though some are nocturnal. Bats are overwhelmingly nocturnal. This means that at most times in Earth's history, since the evolution of bats, there have been different groups of flyers active at different times, reducing competition and allowing coexistence. The sensory systems used for flight also differ. Insects primarily use vision, their compound eyes providing wide-angle views and excellent motion detection. Birds also rely heavily on vision, often with exceptional acuity. Many raptors can spot prey from tremendous distances. Bats use echolocation, a completely different sensory modality. Some nocturnal birds, like nightjars and owls, have excellent hearing and can hunt in near darkness using sound alone, but it's not the same as the active sonar of bats. These differences highlight the multiple solutions that evolution has found to the challenge of flight. There's no single right way to fly. Each group has discovered a set of adaptations that works for their particular body plan, ecology, and evolutionary history. And within each group, there's further variation. Not all insects fly the same way. Not all birds fly the same way. Diversity within each group reflects the specific selective pressures and opportunities each lineage has encountered. Convergent evolution and flight adaptations. One of the most striking aspects of flight evolution is the convergence, the independent evolution of similar traits in unrelated lineages. Despite taking very different evolutionary paths and using very different materials to build their wings, flying animals have converged on many of the same solutions to the problems of aerial locomotion. Consider body shape. All powered flyers tend toward streamlined bodies. Streamlining reduces drag, the resistance encountered when moving through air. A teardrop shape, wider at the front and tapering toward the rear, minimizes turbulence and allows smooth airflow. Birds, bats, and even many flying insects have evolved this basic form, though the details differ. Hollow bones are another convergence. Birds, pterosaurs, and bats all evolved bones that are lighter than the bones of their non-flying relatives. In birds and pterosaurs, this hollowing is extensive, with air sacs from the respiratory system invading the bones, creating a skeletal structure that is both light and strong. Bats have thinner bones than terrestrial mammals of similar size. The trade-off is fragility. Flying animals often have more delicate skeletons than ground dwellers, but the weight savings are essential for flight. Enlarged breastbones with prominent keels are seen in both birds and pterosaurs. These keels provide attachment sites for the powerful pectoral muscles that drive the wings. The larger the keel, the more muscle can attach, and the more power available for flight. Bats don't have a keeled sternum in quite the same way, but they do have enlarged pectoral muscles attached to the sternum and ribs. High metabolic rates and endothermy, warm-bloodedness, have evolved in birds, bats, and likely pterosaurs. Flight demands energy, lots of it, and maintaining a high, stable body temperature allows the muscles to work efficiently. Insects, being ectothermic, cold-blooded, use different strategies, but many flying insects can generate significant internal heat through muscle activity during flight, allowing them to fly even when environmental temperatures are low. Efficient respiratory systems are crucial. Birds have their unique one-way airflow system. Bats have relatively large lungs and high surface area for gas exchange. Pterosaurs likely had air sacs similar to birds, enhancing oxygen delivery. Insects use their tracheal system, and the higher oxygen levels of the Carboniferous may have partially compensated for the limitations of this system. Large eyes or other acute sensory systems are common in flyers. Vision is particularly important for avoiding obstacles, catching prey, and navigating. Many flying animals have excellent eyesight. Bats compensate with echolocation, and some nocturnal flying insects have oversized eyes adapted for low-light conditions. Wing shape varies based on lifestyle, but certain principles apply across groups. Long, narrow wings, high aspect ratio, are efficient for sustained flight over long distances. They generate lift with minimal drag, but they reduce maneuverability. Albatrosses, swifts, and some bats that fly long distances have high aspect ratio wings. Short, broad wings, low aspect ratio, are better for maneuvering in tight spaces and for rapid acceleration. Forest-dwelling birds, many bats, and insects that fly among vegetation tend to have lower aspect ratio wings. The presence of flight feathers in birds is unique, but the principle, a lightweight, flexible surface that can be precisely controlled, is universal. pterosaurs' actinofibrils and bats' musculature within the wing membrane serve similar functions, stiffening and controlling the wing surface to optimize aerodynamics. Migration is another convergent trait. Many birds migrate, sometimes across entire hemispheres. Some bats migrate, though usually over shorter distances. Even some insects migrate, monarch butterflies being the most famous example. Migration allows animals to exploit seasonal abundances, avoid harsh weather, and find suitable breeding sites. It's a strategy made possible by the speed and efficiency of flight, allowing animals to cover distances that would be prohibitive for ground dwellers. Parental care shows some interesting patterns. Birds are famous for their parental investment, incubating eggs and feeding chicks. Bats also provide substantial parental care, with mothers nursing their young for extended periods, and sometimes carrying pups with them during flight. Pterosaurs may have provided some degree of care, though evidence is limited. Insects generally provide little to no parental care, though there are exceptions among social insects. Colour and ornamentation are common. Many birds have bright plumage used in displays. Some bats have distinctive facial features, elaborate nose leaves, or colourful fur. Pterosaurs had elaborate head crests. Even some insects have brilliant colours. These traits are often used in communication, mate choice, or species recognition. The presence of such features suggests that visual signalling is important for many flyers, that the aerial environment provides opportunities for display that are exploited across taxa. Social behaviour varies. Many birds are highly social, forming flocks for migration, roosting or feeding. Some bats roost in huge colonies. Most insects are solitary, though social insects like bees and ants are exceptions. Pterosaurs may have been social. Some fossil sites preserve dozens of individuals together, though whether this represents true social behaviour or simply aggregations at favourable sites is debated. One of the most remarkable convergences is the evolution of nocturnality and the associated sensory adaptations. Bats are primarily nocturnal and use echolocation. Some birds, like nightjars and oilbirds, have also evolved echolocation independently. Many night-flying insects use ultrasonic hearing to detect bat calls and evade predation. The night sky has its own ecology, shaped by the interactions of flyers adapted to darkness. All these convergences demonstrate that flight imposes certain constraints and favours certain solutions. Different lineages, working with different starting materials and different evolutionary histories, arrive at similar endpoints. This doesn't mean evolution is deterministic. There's plenty of variation and many different ways to be a successful flyer, but it does suggest that the physics and ecology of flight push evolution in certain predictable directions. The legacy of flight is one of the most remarkable achievements in the history of life. 4 times, separated by hundreds of millions of years, evolution crafted creatures capable of defying gravity and soaring through the sky. Insects, pterosaurs, birds, and bats each solved the problem independently. Each brought something new to the aerial realm. The impact of flight on Earth's ecosystems cannot be overstated. Flying animals are pollinators, dispersing pollen and enabling the reproduction of countless plant species. They are seed dispersers, carrying fruits and seeds to new locations, shaping forests and spreading plant communities. They are predators, controlling populations of herbivorous insects and small animals. They are scavengers, recycling nutrients from dead organisms. They are prey, providing food for a multitude of other species. Flight has also shaped human history and culture. Birds have been symbols and inspirations for millennia, appearing in myths, art, and religion. We've envied their freedom, their perspective, their ability to escape the bounds of Earth. The dream of human flight, realized only in the last century, was driven in part by observations of birds and attempts to understand how they achieve the impossible. Today, flying animals face unprecedented challenges. Habitat loss, climate change, pollution, and human activity are impacting populations worldwide. Many bird species are declining. Bats face threats from white nose syndrome, a fungal disease that has killed millions. Insects are experiencing dramatic declines in many regions, with consequences we are only beginning to understand. Yet flight endures. Every spring, billions of birds migrate north, following ancient routes, driven by instincts honed over millions of years. Every evening, bats emerge from their roosts to hunt. Every day, insects fill the air, their wings humming, their lives brief but vital. The legacy of those first flyers, the ancient insects that took to the air when the world was young, continues in every beating wing, every soaring bird, every darting bat. Flight is a gift evolution bestowed upon certain lineages, a capability so useful, so advantageous, that it arose again and again. And though the pterosaurs are gone, vanished in the catastrophe that ended the Cretaceous, their legacy lives on in the birds that descended from their dinosaurian cousins, in the bats that followed millions of years later, and in our own continued fascination with the sky. When you see a bird overhead, take a moment to appreciate it. That creature is the result of hundreds of millions of years of evolution, a direct descendant of dinosaurs that learned to fly. Its hollow bones, its feathers, its keeled sternum, its one-way respiratory system, all are adaptations refined across eons. When you hear a bat's echolocation click on a summer evening, remember that you're experiencing one of the most sophisticated sensory systems in the animal kingdom, a biological sonar that maps the world in sound. When you watch a dragonfly hover, its wings a blur, you're seeing technology perfected long before the first dinosaur walked the earth. Flight is a marvel. It's a triumph of evolution, a testament to what is possible when natural selection acts over vast stretches of time. It's a reminder that life is creative, resourceful, endlessly innovative. And it's a gift we still witness every day, if we only take the time to look up. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, think about the journey we've taken, from the giant dragonflies of the Carboniferous, to the soaring pterosaurs of the Mesozoic, to the first birds arising from dinosaurian ancestors, to the bats that emerged in the Eocene. Each step was a leap into the unknown, each generation pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Nature learned to fly not once, but 4 times, each time writing a new chapter in the story of life on Earth. And that story continues tonight, under the same sky that has sheltered flyers for hundreds of millions of years, under the same stars that guided ancient migrations and witnessed the first tentative flights of creatures bold enough to trust the air. Sleep well, and may your dreams carry you gently through skies of wonder. Thank you for joining me on Bedtime Biology. If you enjoyed this journey through the evolution of flight, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments and let me know where you're checking in from. Until next time, rest easy and keep exploring the quiet marvels of the natural world. Good night.